because while he's here, I want to spend as much time with him as possible. And also, while we're at it live on air, let's look at the schedule. When can we get Wayne back in here for a full hour tomorrow? When I heard that Wayne Madsen was going to be leaving the United States because of the a foreign embassy, a major media outlet, and a confirmation through the source in the U.S. Embassy that the White House wants him dead. And Wayne, of course, formerly with the NSA, syndicated columnist, very well respected, written some of the biggest publications in the country. When he brings something out like that, we certainly respect it. He, of course, is one of the guys meeting with the D.C. Madam and helped get her on the show right before she was suicided, Arkansided. And so Wayne is here with us today and tomorrow before he gets ready to leave the United States to work on his magnum opus exposing the CIA ties of Barack Obama. Wayne Madsen Report.com. Wayne, great to have you here with us today.
Good to be with you here in Austin, Alex.
We're honored to have you. We're going to break here in a moment, and I want to get into your research on the CIA and birth certificate issues that are really heating up. But Dr. Paul Craig Roberts was talking about the fact that the dollar is doomed and that the elites running things are crazy. You've lived in D.C. for decades. I mean, is there a method to their madness, or has it gone to just pure hubris?
I think we haven't seen anything like this before in D.C., because even the word coming out of the Treasury Department, now I'm not talking about the senior officials, but those people that work in the bowels of the place, is not encouraging. And you hear the same thing in Congress. And the news out that the U.S. economy will be eclipsed by China in 2016. I think it's clearly, the writing is on the wall what's going to happen to us and our economy. It's happening right now. Of course, to listen to Obama things.
We've had two Fed heads, Kansas City and Dallas, say we are completely screwed.
Well, right, and this is
and they've said the Fed is doing it.
Yeah,
I mean, I've never seen a rebellion in the Fed like that.
Right. So, even they're eating their own dead here now.
Well, they wouldn't do that unless they knew it was dire.
Right. And the word has been coming out of Treasury for a couple of years now about where this economy is heading and where the dollar is heading.
I mean, is it like the Russians before their collapse where they're just delusional?
Well, when you see this push now, and remember what happened to Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union, they privatized all those state-owned industries, and now we see this push to do this in the various states.
Let's talk about the method of the madness, because I agree with your analysis. I mean, it is wild what they're doing, but they've planned this, just like we're a third world country. Wayne, stay there. Break down what they did in the Soviet Union when it collapsed, what they're going to do here. And by the way, if you're in the middle class, that means you make more than $50,000 a year. They're going to rob you. Wayne Madsen. There's too much confusion, my friend. But, for those that research this information, there's really not confusion. There's just befuddled amazement at what the system is doing and how crazy they are. Now you were getting into the parallel between the collapse of the Soviet system and the robber barons, the oligarchs coming in, and what's being set up and planned here. The solution by the Republicans is a form of austerity that doesn't fix the Federal Reserve root of it. It just simply privatizes the system. Break that down.
Well, if you look across the country, what's happening, we see further privatization of turnpikes, for example, going to private companies to collect tolls. Everyone should always be worried when a cash-intensive operation is privatized. It's a recipe for money laundering on a grand scale.
Well, they beef the prices. They lobby to not fix the other roads. They take over existing roads.
Right. The roads, we see now with privatization possibly of public lands, state-owned forests, state-owned parks. It goes on and on.
The old-timers said that in the mid-'90s was going to happen for collateral on the debt. Now they admit, just like we're a third world country, that's happening.
So we're, what's going to happen next? Are we going to see corporate sponsorship like all these sports arenas of, federal monuments sponsored by various oil companies and banks and what have you? That may be around the corner.
Well, it's like the 600-plus Greek islands. One big broker they owed $3 billion to through fraud. He said, I'll just take that famous island, and they transferred it to him directly.
Right. Well, maybe they'll grab Hawaii or something here soon. and just put it up on the auction block. But I think this just goes to show that the people who are benefiting from this. I should have also mentioned what's happening to public education. You got the Washington Post. 70% of their business is from a private education firm that they own, Kaplan Business. Now we see moves to try to privatize public education. The camels with the nose under the tent is private, charter schools, magnet schools. It's really just another word, set of words for privatization. And
which are really corporate schools. Those aren't private schools now. They're Bill and Melinda Gates schools, which is what Tarpley and others said Obama's specialty was in Chicago, is actually union busting, but not to get rid of the corrupt unions, to transfer it to the corporations.
And Rahm Emanuel is brought in as the Chicago head of the school board, one of these people who favors that. So we're going to see that continue in Chicago. In Washington, D.C., Arnie Duncan, the Secretary of Education, one of Obama's basketball buddies, is strong for this. And I say the Washington Post can't even cover this adequately or properly because they own a private education firm.
That's right. We're going to break here in a few minutes, but let's get started now. You've got some big news dealing on them trying to rewrite the history of Obama's family and all these intelligence agency connections, because your research just isn't into the birth certificate, a lot of it now being duplicated and expanded on by Jerome Corsi, but also into his CIA connections.
Well, especially his passport records and what he was doing when he was supposedly at Columbia and Occidental and potentially at Harvard Law. Right now, we've got an article that came out in the New York Times Magazine, written by Janie Scott, who's got a book coming out about Obama's mother. They're changing the facts. She even had an interview with Obama in the Oval Office, but we're being told things that just did not occur. They are changing the facts. They're changing Wikipedia as we speak.
New York Magazine is basically a Cass Sunstein organ more and more.
Oh, I think so. This is New York Times, but what we have is Lolo Soetoro, the stepfather's history being revised. We have Stanley Ann Dunham's history being revised. We have the history of Indonesia prior to and after the 1965 coup against President Sukarno also being revised. This is happening in plain sight, and we're supposed to believe that this New York Times reporter got the interview with Obama in the Oval Office, spoke to all these people who knew the family without any independent corroboration of that. So I think this is a huge... They're obviously preparing for this to be raised in the election campaign, and this is sort of like a preemptive move on their part.
And that's more evidence of the guilt. If it had no proof behind it, they would have released the original certificate, not the receipt. They would have dispelled all this early on. But all of his records are kept very, very secret.
Especially the area that seems to be a lot of reluctance to go after. And remember, the passport file was being rifled through in January of 2008, right in the primary season. We had John Brennan's company, the Analysis Corporation. He's now Obama's deputy national security advisor. They were the ones committing the act of rifling through the passport file. I think they were trying to get remove information. We know that Stanley Ann Dunham's passport file prior to '68 was inadvertently destroyed, we're told. So I think what we have here...
Stay there. Tell us what we have on the other side. Let's go into it in detail. Well, amazing to have Wayne Madsen of WayneMadsenReport.com in studio with us. We're going to be going at least 20 minutes of overdrive into the next hour. We're going to clear the phone system out and open the phones up specifically if you have a question or a comment for Wayne Madsen coming up at the start of the next segment into the next hour. The toll-free number to join us is 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231. Okay, Wayne, we got Jerome Corsi being put on house arrest when he tried to go over to Kenya a few years ago. You've got the records now. He's reported in Indonesia, Kenya, Hawaii. They're all destroyed. They're all missing. Governor Abercrombie said 4 months ago when he was governor-elect, I'm going to get into those records. He went and said, okay, the original birth certificate isn't there. But it's not just that. It's his whole background. You were getting into them trying to basically rewrite history right now. They are really, really scared of this. Sure, Obama's a teleprompter reading puppet, but if he gets politically damaged, that will damage everything he's done.
Well, I think it's interesting what we know. Some of the tidbits that came out in this article in New York Times Magazine that we did not know before. We found out that when Obama was a young boy living in Jakarta, he said he wanted to be the future prime minister of Indonesia. He also said he wanted to be president of the United States at some point in time. But I would imagine you could not be the prime minister of Indonesia unless you were somehow, you knew that you were an Indonesian citizen.
Well, he changed his name to Barry Soetoro.
Barry Hussein Soetoro. We're also now told that Lolo Soetoro, according to this article in the New York Times, that Lolo Soetoro worked not as a government relations person for Mobil Oil, which we were told he did as sort of like payback for the work he did to help install Suharto with the CIA coup. Now we're told he worked for Unical, Union Oil of California. So that's changed. We've got this report from somebody who was in Indonesia at the same time. Stanley Ann Dunham, the mother, was there saying, "Oh, in the late '60s and the early '70s, Indonesia was like they called it the Indonesian Prague Spring. It was a honeymoon. There was freedom of the press, and student groups had a lot." Where are they getting this stuff from? Suharto was a brutal dictator. He was a brutal dictator up until he left office. Basically, he was responsible for the brutal invasion and occupation of East Timor in 1975.
Mass murders, mass executions.
So this is all being rewritten to make it look like the time that Stanley Ann Dunham was in Indonesia, there was this Prague Spring, and she was this headbanded hippie running around throwing flowers at everybody, when in fact she was pinpointing people for the Indonesian army to go out and massacre who were suspected of being communist or anti-regime. That's what she was.
She was posing as a leftist.
Absolutely. And
that's why you're getting the threats through the State Department and a foreign embassy and a major publication, because they're concerned about there's smoke, then there's fire with the birth certificate, but it's really this intelligence background they're worried about.
Absolutely. I think this is the thing that can sink them. I think this can open up the door. If Obama traveled to Pakistan in 1981 on an Indonesian passport, if he had an Indonesian passport, he had already committed himself to fealty to another sovereign. He cannot be the president of the United States. I know there's people with dual passports, but let's look at the fact that he supposedly goes to Occidental on a foreign student scholarship program that was only available to foreign students. So we see if this,
when you give up your citizenship, because a lot of countries don't let you have dual. Indonesia, you have to give it up. He gave it up.
He would have had to give it up, right? Indonesia does not permit dual citizenship, and so we have an issue here. And
by the way, I hope folks know. I mean, you're a serious journalist who's never said you've been death threatened before. You've been told. I mean, what you're doing is dangerous right now. Just like when I had the D.C. madam on the show a few months before they killed her, and we talked to her landlord at the condo or the manager. She said, they're following me. I got to get these papers to my mom's. He sent me copies of her release. It was not her handwriting. She said on air, "No, I'll never kill myself." I mean, they killed her. I hope people know you're risking your life with what you're doing right now.
Well, this is an important story, and I think the White House is somewhat comfortable with the birth certificate story, because they know that there's all these dead ends there. But I think that it's the passports, it's Obama's past in Indonesia, and what he did when he's ostensibly at Columbia, Occidental, and Harvard, that really, and also when he was supposedly a community organizer. He wasn't. He was obviously informing on some of the black groups in Chicago at the time, the El Rukin Gang, the Black Panther Party, the Nation of Islam. He was plopped in there. Those people in South Chicago did not trust. I've spoken to them. They did not trust Obama. He was just a little too cool for them.
That's right. You spent a lot of time in Chicago.
Absolutely. And I've had discussions with people who worked with the Nation of Islam, worked for the Black Panther Party, knew the guy that ran the El Rukin gang. And look, the El Rukins at the time, when he plopped in there in '86 from that CIA job in Manhattan, this was at the height of you look at the Chicago Tribune. El Rukin gang thought to be doing getting a deal with Gaddafi to get shoulder-launched missiles to shoot down planes at O'Hare. Now we see Obama's attacking Libya. Is this score settling? Is this somebody that he had a problem with way back then because he was looking at these groups in Chicago and their potential links or alleged links to Gaddafi? It looks like maybe we see a little bit of score settling here, a la George W. Bush with Saddam Hussein.
Well, they're definitely scared of this whole intelligence minion background, and we know these agencies mainly recruit for higher-level positions out of families. Go over the basic spectrum of the intelligence background connections in his family.
Well, let's start with his grandparents. Stanley Armour Dunham, his grandfather, ostensibly was in World War II, was in France. Comes back to the United States and works for a series of furniture stores in Oklahoma, in Kansas, and in Washington State, and then he all of a sudden goes to work for one in Hawaii. You could maybe see that with chain furniture stores, but let's look at the time frame. He was going from one store to another. They were not part of like the Levitt's furniture chain. This looks like a military transfer, but I would suggest it was an intelligence agency transfer from place to place. He doesn't show up in Washington State until 1956. With the daughter, Obama's mother is enrolled in high school there. The word is that potentially he and his wife, Madeline Dunham, were working for the Office of Strategic Services in Beirut, starting in 42 until about 56. We know that things were getting dicey in Lebanon. 1958, President Eisenhower sent the Marines and Air stormed ashore, occupied the country for about a year. So it would make sense for them to get their daughter out of there, to get the agents who had families out of country. Shows up in Seattle and Mercer Island, and then a few years later, boom, he pops up as a furniture store salesman in Honolulu. That Pratt Furniture, by the way, only exists in corporate records. It was not a brick and mortar store in Honolulu. There's no record of a Pratt.
His cover is a furniture salesman.
Absolutely, and he wouldn't be the only one. I think we all know Julia Child worked for the OSS and CIA before she went to work for the OSS during World War II. She worked for a furniture store in Manhattan. So this is seems to be fairly standard. Kind of odd. Why furniture stores? Maybe it's because they move large amounts of goods.
It's also nondescript. It doesn't really ring a bell.
Yes,
people know to watch journalists and nature photographers and Christian groups of mercenaries. They don't think about furniture. But then we get into other parts of the family. It's on record they're working for high-powered groups.
Oh, right. And let's look at the CIA's use of anthropologists. His mother, ostensibly an anthropologist.
That's one of their favorite because they go into the most rural areas.
Absolutely. Now that's called the human terrain system, which they send these people out to basically just parse people, different tribes, ethnic groups, for targeting purposes. If
they ever need to play people off against each other, they've already got the.
Absolutely, and this has been going on for a long time. It was done with the OSS. By the way, we get to the OSS during World War II. An OSS agent also worked for British intelligence, who was an anthropologist, worked extensively in South America. He was his last name was Clothier. He was from the Strawbridge and Clothier department store family in Philadelphia. So here we get back to the stores, the merchandise activities again. Another one was connected to the Lothrop family that ran Woodward and Lothrop department store in Washington. So there seems to be a, Well,
that goes back to the Dutch and British East India Company, where they had their intelligence officers on the trading ships. That was their entree into the interiors of what South America, Central America, Africa, Asia, Dutch East Indies.
Absolutely. We have people going out to purchase obviously goods to be sold in these stores in the United States. It's great cover, and it seems like OSS and CIA used used that to a great extent. So the idea that Stanley Armour Dunham's cover was a furniture store guy, salesman, is not all that bizarre. It seems at first glance it looks bizarre.
But we see how he's all over the world. Continue.
All over the world. Also, the reports that he may have taken Obama's mother to Cuba at the onset of the Cuban Revolution, circa 1960.
Wow, continue with the rest of the family.
Okay, we have Madeline Dunham, the grandmother, one of the first female vice presidents of the Bank of Hawaii. Unbelievable rise for somebody where we still had the glass ceiling and management positions for many women. She rises to vice president. She's in charge of escrow accounts for the Bank of Hawaii. Clearly, the Bank of Hawaii was used by several CIA front activities as a pass-through to pay off various dictators. During her entire time at the Bank of Hawaii, we had the Nugan Hand Bank, which was a CIA front, that replaced by another operation in Honolulu after Nugan Hand collapsed. These were CIA activities, and the Bank of Hawaii was facilitating, and she was right in the middle of it all.
It's like pre-BCCI, and we know the history of the banks you just mentioned. Continue.
We have now Lolo Soetoro. Again, his history is being reinvented in this New York Times piece. Lolo Soetoro marries Obama's mother in March of 1965. In May of 65, he's called back because he's a reserve officer in the Indonesian Army. Suharto wants to get all these reservists back to help plan the coup. In the article in the New York Times, it states that Lolo Soetoro was called back and conscripted in the military. Now, conscripted means to go in as an enlisted man, and that they were sent to fight rebels in West New Guinea, getting him out of Java entirely, where, of course, Obama's mother shows up in 1967. Then they're painting this whole thing that, Suharto comes in and he creates this sort of Indonesian Prague Spring. This is fake history. This did not happen. We look at...
If you were a communist or a liberal, they hunted you down and blew your head off.
There are about 800,000 to 1 million people were killed there. Ethnic Chinese, too, because...
And it turns out that's Obama's dad's specialty in Africa, is posing as a commie and finding the folks to wipe
Absolutely.
out. And then it's Obama's specialty. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Right. Well, we have Barack Sr., of course, who comes over. The thing that's common is the East-West Center at the University of Hawaii, a CIA front known to be Lolo Soetoro, Barack Obama Sr., both at that East-West Center, known to be a CIA front. He's sent eventually back to Kenya to try to get him into the Kenyan government because he's the wrong tribe. He's in a significant minority tribe, but not the dominant tribe. He does not get in to be the finance minister. So here we have President Obama saying he wanted to be prime minister of Indonesia. Had his father, or his alleged father, become, say, the president of Kenya, Barack Obama, our president, could very well be the president of Kenya today. Certainly, the son...
The point is, they were positioning him all over. Absolutely. He was like a skeleton key.
Absolutely. So, what country you want to be leader of, President Obama? It sounds like you had 3 shots at being president of some country. Prime Minister of Indonesia, president of Kenya, potentially, but now president of the United States.
And the intelligence connections continue. I've read connections with his father in Kenya to British intel. We know they were all over Kenya.
Well, we see the father brought over in 1960 on the Airlift Africa project. That was an attempt to try to compete with the Soviet Union that created the People's Friendship University in Moscow. In 1961, they renamed that Patrice Lumumba University because the CIA knocked him off in Congo that year. So we see Barack Sr. coming over on the CIA-funded. They even got some money from the Joseph Kennedy Foundation to help with that. So we see him coming in, but then that marriage fritters away. It looks like Barack Obama's mother was actually being introduced by her father, to all these potential third world leaders, movers and shakers. I mean, what kind of father would basically have...
What do they call those? Honeypot, a swallow?
Yeah, well, honeypot, but he's, his daughter's like 18 years old, and he's introducing her to all these people from these various, Barack Sr. certainly, and she gets pregnant, and... well,
that's like Clinton's mother was an admitted prostitute.
Yeah, I mean, this is, you got kind of wonder what kind of family was this to, especially, and of course the big thing is Barack Sr. and Dunham meet at a Russian language class at the University of Hawaii in 1960. Now, who's taking Russian during the height of the Cold War. This is at the height of the U-2 situation, and it's Eisenhower transitioning to Kennedy. It's the height of the Cold War.
It just goes on for hours. All the intelligence connections.
Absolutely, you can keep peeling back this onion, and you'll still find more connections. And you can go back to the Bush family, and obviously, yeah, we know George H.W. Bush was CIA director. We know he was in Dallas during the when the Kennedy.
It's now been declassified. He was in the CIA before he said he was.
Absolutely. They
didn't just make him director,
right? But we kind of knew that from documents that finally. But with Obama, we have all these gaping holes. It's like,
well, see, that's that left cover. I mean, when it comes out he's CIA, that is going to really destroy the myth of the messianic, little surfer boy.
Oh, absolutely. This whole idea that, again, in the New York Times article, they say that the Obamas, the Soetoros, were living in a very poor neighborhood. They had to hunt wild boar to get something on the table. They lived in the Menteng district, which at the time was the brand new diplomatic kind of compound for the diplomats and the high-level government officials. What are they talking about?
So they've got the Swiss Family Robinson thing going for him.
Yeah.
Why don't they just say he came from Krypton and landed in a flying saucer?
I think he's even joked about that himself.
Yeah, we do have a clip of that.
but it's just amazing to see how the New York Times and the White House are working together to rewrite his history.
And that's why you were told, or you're guessing that's why you're getting threats from the White House?
I assume because the initial threat was passed to me it was an allied nation, but it was in Asia, and it's a country that keeps a close eye on Indonesia, so they know what's going on there. They keep their ears open. And also, it was confirmed to me by an Indonesian source who talked to a State Department official here that, he's marked. There are Indonesian connections to the threats, or at least Asian connections, and in one case specifically Indonesian threat.
So they're really worried about you getting over to Indonesia. We'll be right back, folks. This is very important information. Wayne Madsen, we're going to come back in the next segment and go to these callers, but shifting gears into some other subjects, I want to get into the TSA, the economy a little bit more, but finishing up with Obama's background from all the pieces you've got. And, of course, you're going to be traveling around the world doing some more investigation. Now, people should pray for you and support you at WayneMadsenReport.com, which is a subscription site, folks. Real journalists need your support out there. As you're on this trail, looking at enough pieces of the jigsaw, what does it look like to you?
Well, I think it's clear that Obama was groomed from a very young age, and that's not to say he was the only one. They probably have all kinds of people they're grooming for the highest office in the country. But I think Obama was the right person at the right time after 8 years of Bush. They put that hope and change message out like it was a Pepsi commercial. The logo was even the same as the Pepsi advertising logo. And we bought it. I remember, of course, in '68 when they repackaged Richard Nixon. It's the new Nixon. It was like a new brand of detergent. It wasn't the old Nixon with the 5 o'clock shadow. You won't have Dick Nixon to kick. They did the same thing with Obama, but I think, unlike Richard Nixon, this was an intelligence agency operation. I wouldn't suggest that the CIA had much to do with Richard Nixon. As a matter of fact, they probably had a lot to do with removing him from the White House.
Yeah, they're tired of strong presidents that actually exercise the executive power. They want purely held, kept minions.
Right, and so the word I get from about Obama from people who see him on Air Force One, who encounter him, is he's very cold, he's arrogant. They'll say, "Good morning, Mr. President." He won't respond. I mean, at least George W. Bush did that. He might have been an idiot in all other respects, but we have a guy who I think he believes he's entitled. He's been told, he said, other than saying he wanted to be president of Indonesia, he said he wanted to be president of the United States. So clearly and we're told, because he had this rags to riches story, there was never any rags in his background.
But he's looking he's very polished. He's looking more and more angry these days, though.
Well, yeah. Oh, yes. I think it's getting to him. I think, from what I understand, he has a very thin skin for criticism. And at one point in time, there was some feeling that maybe he wasn't going to run again for re-election. But his wife, Michelle, is apparently the same way. Very thin skin when it comes to criticism. But this election may not be a cakewalk. He got a cakewalk the last time. Okay, it got a little nasty between him and Hillary. But I think now he's got his 4 years to run on, doing everything for Wall Street, nothing for Main Street.
Where does stage terror play in? Because I really see a lot of White House advisors, as you know, are in the news saying, man, gee, a terror attack would really help us.
Well, yes. I mean, look at Cass Sunstein with all his cognitive disinformation, infiltration. Rahm Emanuel, you never let a good crisis go to waste. He's now mayor. He will be soon the mayor of Chicago. I really fear for Chicago because I think all the right...
they have the highest gas prices there.
Right, and we've got Larry Silverstein now, the owner of the Willis Tower, the former Sears Tower. We've got all kinds of military operations going on in Chicago, and there's been some very strange financial dealings that have been passed on to me about maritime liens against the Treasury Department. Liens that were put in by the governor of Illinois, Secretary of State, the Chicago Police. What's going on in Chicago, I think we have to really be fearful of the city of Chicago. And would Obama sacrifice Chicago? He has no roots in Chicago other than the fact he was plopped in there by some federal agency.
So a lot of people in their gut have seen all the moves, but also strategically that a false flag is in the offing in Chicago.
People I talk to in Chicago feel that way. They feel that it's going to happen in this mid-America city.
I've had Chicagoans tell me that they're telling folks get out of the Sears Tower.
Right. Well, we do know that, Chicago's always been called America's city. It's a city of neighborhoods. It's a lot of different ethnic groups. It really is a true American city. And everyone in the Midwest has some connection to Chicago, either through business, family, or even just going there because New York's too far away. And
so hitting that will get everybody scared. Investigative journalist Wayne Madsen with us. We're here live into the 4th hour today. It is the 25th day of April 2011 on this Monday edition, and we're going to go to some of your phone calls here in a moment. But finishing up, you're saying you spent a lot of time in Chicago in the last year investigating the mafia connections that are pretty much public. And so bottom line, you're saying they're sending Rahm Emanuel, the admitted Israeli operative, over there to what? Get things ready for a little special event?
Well, I certainly would be worried about what could happen in Chicago because let's look at Obama covering up various aspects of his own private life there, his and some of his closest advisors. We also have to realize there was a trade. Rahm Emanuel leaves as White House chief of staff, winds up as mayor of Chicago. Bill Daley's brother, Mayor Richard Daley's brother, Bill Daley, is now the White House chief of staff. Very nice little...
and he was one of the guys in the whole banker scam.
Oh, absolutely. He was, Morgan Stanley, the whole part of the whole bailout. Instead of being White House chief of staff, why isn't he under indictment? I mean, this is what Elliot Spitzer is saying about where are the jail sentences? Where has been Eric Holder, the Attorney General, on indicting these people? They only took out a couple of them. And I think we have to really look at this nexus between Bill Daley, the chief of staff, Obama's from Chicago, Valerie Jarrett is a slumlord, land scam artist from Chicago. Axelrod has gone back to Chicago to run the Obama campaign. We got Emanuel there as mayor. I mean, it's a perfect city if they wanted to pull something off. I would add that Sam Zell is the owner of the Chicago Tribune, and they've emaciated the investigative staffs of the two major Chicago newspapers, the Chicago Tribune and the Sun-Times. So there's nobody there except for some bloggers and some independent journalists who are really looking into what's been going on.
And I've seen independent journalists, when Rahm's out in public in a park, they try to talk to him, and the media roughs them up. I mean, they just love being servants.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there really isn't any more independent media as a major mainstream media in the city of Chicago. Now, this is a town with a rich history of muckraking journalists. Mike Royko, and we can go, the list goes on. But they don't exist there to any great extent any longer.
What do you expect the Republicans to do? Because they're basically scapegoating the welfare moms, which is part of the bankruptcy. But if you don't deal with the private Federal Reserve, the root of the scam, everything else is rearranging deck chairs.
Well, I mean, yes. Yeah, look at the Republic. I personally, I think that Obama will be reelected. I mean, look at the Republican side. That is going to be a three-ring circus without the circus master. Donald Trump, he's a sideshow. Now, he's criticizing Karl Rove, and, it's a food fight. And it will remain a food fight up through the primaries and to the convention. Isn't it funny? Obama has no body on the Democratic side willing to challenge him in the primary. Dennis Kucinich said he should have a challenger. My feeling is the way the Obama administration has acted like a mafia, I think they've scared basically any potential rival who would take Obama on in the Democratic primary. I don't think we may see some minor people, but I don't think we're going to see a major.
Well, the word is a lot of Republicans think that 4 more years of Obama will even cement their takeover even more.
Right, and of course they're looking at future elections, possibly, taking over the Senate. And eventually, locking in the White House in a pretty much landslide victory.
The trifecta,
right? And and look, Wall Street. What problems do they have with Obama? He's given them everything. He's screwed over Main Street, but he's given Wall Street everything. So if it ain't,
and he puts the liberals to sleep. Now they like torture and war. It's kind of liberal and cute.
Right. We can't, you can't even muster a big crowd for an anti-war demonstration.
Well, that's what I've said to Republicans that criticize Obama. His rhetoric's different, but his actions are George Bush squared. You guys should love it.
Right. And he's even seen and raised Bush on some issues, like going after whistleblowers in the government. We've now got one guy, former official of the NSA, being charged under the Espionage Act of 1917. Only 4 people in the history of the United States have been charged under that act. And we have Tom Drake now, his trial starting in Baltimore soon, and they want to put him away forever. Not because he revealed anything of a national security nature, he revealed that there was massive corruption with contracts at NSA to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. And
they're publicly going after him for exposing fraud. That message is, let us steal the money. We're mafia. Sit down and shut up.
Absolutely. And the people he's talking about were Michael Hayden, who was the NSA director at the time, and the current director, who's now got the added hat of Cyber Command, General Keith Alexander. And it was Obama that gave him that extra star and that new command.
By the way, I'm really worried about him running a false flag on the web and then saving it by taking the freedom away. They're really prepping everybody for that.
And Obama said he was going to have the most transparent and open government in history, and he has cracked down on Freedom of Information Act releases. I mean, this is going beyond what even Bush did. Bush was kind of benign in that respect. So, yes, in many respects, Obama is worse on some issues.
And so Republicans that thought tyranny was cool, they ought to really love what Obama's doing.
They should. I think the neocons, the neocons, don't, they're happy with him, but they wish he would go further. They like we heard, McCain's over there in Libya the other day, standing in front of one of these rebel flags, the old monarchist flag, saying we need to have troops here. This is
the troops are already there. He's getting them ready. You've been to Libya. What's your view of it?
Well, I was there in October of 2009. I was in Gaddafi's tent. He was celebrating the 40th anniversary of his revolution. He called it the Green Revolution. It has nothing to do with the environment, I might add. And it was quite clear that it was a dictatorship. With all what he said about we have direct democracy, the people rule, it's not true. His image was everywhere. People didn't smile. People whispered. You can tell when you're in a dictatorship. But unfortunately...
Kind of the way America's going, with images of the government and Napolitano everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. And I think with what happened in Tunisia and Egypt on both sides of Libya, it was a foregone conclusion or would be a revolt there. But I think the problem is that certain Western powers, Britain, France, United States, saw, hey, this is a chance to go in and grab the oil. And that's exactly what Trump said. We ought to go in there and grab the oil. Well, that's what this is all about. So people who might have been neutral on Gaddafi said, well, he may be a dictator, but he's our dictator. We saw the same thing play out in Iraq when they were invaded. People who might not have liked Saddam Hussein did come to the defense of Iraq because they're nationalists. They want to protect their own country. So we see.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing. Afrikaan also wants to use Libya as a base.
Right. Gaddafi was building a huge international airport that was going to be the hub for Africa. What a perfect place to stick AFRICOM, with a huge runway that can handle all kinds of aircraft, and a hub for Africa. And now we see, of course, these revolutions starting to spill south of the Sahara into other countries. And I think this plays right into the AFRICOM game plan to go in there.
Well, you've seen the same card with the French going into the Ivory Coast.
Right, and they're doing it for us. I mean, the French are basically, this isn't the Chirac France anymore. This is Sarkozy France, and he's basically, not to, use a cliche, he's our French poodle.
All right, let's go ahead and talk to Julio in Illinois. We're going to go to the bottom of the hour here with calls. Julio in Illinois, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Gentlemen, good afternoon to the both of you. Happy Easter. It's great to talk to two true journalists. History is going to show that you guys were reporting the truth all along. You guys are absolutely right, hitting the nail on the coffin. False flag will happen in Chicago. I'm from Chicago. I'm terrified. You look at Bill Daley. He used to work where? J.P. Morgan Chase. What's J.P. Morgan Chase's problem? They're shorting the silver market. Silver is booming, almost hit 50 in the Asian markets today. I have a feeling once they're trying to speed up the Blagojevich retrial just so they can shut up Blagojevich, because he truly can send Rahm Emanuel into deep trouble if that happens.
Yeah, they're not even letting Blagojevich defend himself, play tapes, or talk. And I thought when you got one trial and it was a hung jury, you get off. I guess they're going to try him like over and over again, Wayne.
Oh, absolutely. He wants to have played the 500 hours of wiretap information. The judge is dirty. James Zagel is a dirty judge. The prosecutor, Patrick Fitzgerald, is absolutely tainted. He's very dirty. It goes back to the 93 World Trade Center.
People aren't dirty in Chicago. The government's good.
Out of New York, Fitzgerald. But
New York's not dirty either. These are good people.
Yeah, right. But basically, Fitzgerald is always, I think he's probably got also a background with the CIA because of the cover-up of critical evidence in the 93 World Trade Center bombing, and now he's sitting in Chicago as the U.S. attorney for Northern Illinois. Another guy we ought to keep an eye on, who's in the right place, possibly at the right time.
For those that don't know, the feds cooked the bomb, trained the driver, and carried out the attack of the World Trade Center the first time.
Right, and there were critical intercepts between the UN mission for Sudan and the Foreign Ministry of Sudan and Khartoum that were never entered into evidence, showing that in the 93 World Trade Center bombing, Osama bin Laden was involved, but because he was a CIA asset until 95, they didn't want to introduce that because they'll say, hey, CIA, what was one of your guys doing involved in this? So they laid it on the blind shake. We're
going to skip this final break and go all the way up to 29 before we end this live transmission and go back into key retransmission. Thank you, Julio. Gary in Florida. Gary, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Kudos to you, Alex. I love your documentaries.
Thank you.
Very informative. But besides uncovering the lies and the deception and the conning and conniving and all this, how can we go into action? Like, we need indictments against these people.
Well, first you got to take your states and your counties back, and when you do stand up against this mafia, a lot of times they'll kill you or set you up. So we need to get a lot of people angry and awake, all putting it on the line, so that there's too many targets, and we just basically take the moral high ground, expose these people to where the emperor has no clothes. I mean, like this royal wedding, the emperor has no clothes. They're a bunch of despots. They're inviting a bunch of dictators over. It's a celebration of evil and despotism, and it's the same thing there. We call it for what it is. Wayne.
Well, I think so, and I get back to the issue. During the Bush administration, we turned out 350,000 people at anti-war demonstrations in Washington, D.C. We had a recent one, a couple of hundred maybe. Because, what's disappeared? Well, the Soros money doesn't go there anymore. The establishment Democratic money doesn't go. And even back in those demonstrations, very few elected Democratic officials would even show up.
Well, those groups are all not just they're all funded by Ford. They're all funded by Soros. The money's there for them not to do anything.
Absolutely. And so we see the Democrats saying, well, as long as it's a Republican in the White House, we'll go out and protest. But the minute there's a Democrat who's doing the same exact thing, in some cases worse. I mean, Obama's got 3 official wars going on right now, where Bush had 2. And we don't know. Pakistan, Covert.
They've been saying get the drones out.
Absolutely. So, these are phonies. These Democrats are phonies. They call themselves progressives. Soros gives $1 million to Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch selects.
Yeah, they call Soros a communist, but it's keep your friends close, enemies closer. It's all about controlling the left. And the Republicans are about controlling the right.
And it's exactly what Rupert Murdoch does on the right-wing side of the house with the, Fox News and all the other media that he owns.
For decades saying there's no world government.
Right.
When it was being built. Anything else, caller? All right, he dropped off. Deborah in Florida, or no, Deborah in California. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, Alex. I just want to thank you for waking me up 2 years ago. I've been a member ever since. God bless you and yours. And Wayne Madsen, I pray for your safe passage wherever you're going to go. I was born and raised in Chicago. My father was an iron worker there, usually ate his lunch about 80 stories above the city. And love to joke about the Levitt store. My question is this. In Sudan, that Sudan ordeal that happened in 83 to 205, where they had to run for their lives to Kenya, is this what's happening in the Ivory Coast now? And how much is the CIA or Black Ops in the ordeal with France and everything?
It's admitted that the West is backing the rebels that murder thousands at a pop with machetes, and then they remove the one government and put in the murderers. It's just like Rwanda. In fact, you were part of that war crimes tribunal.
Right. In Rwanda, of course, Clinton was president at the time, and there was a double assassination. They shot down the airplane carrying the presidents of Rwanda and Burundi, both ethnic Hutus, and they're the dominant peoples in both countries. And it was the Central Intelligence Agency working with other groups in Rwanda that helped Kagame, the current president, our dictator in Rwanda, shoot that plane down. That triggered this huge civil war. We know that Kagame himself was murdering his own Tutsis to make it look like, oh, look what these evil people are doing. You have to come to our assistance. Clinton was just benign in the whole thing, but the Defense Intelligence Agency was very active in Rwanda. Clinton says, well, we didn't know. He knew full well what was going on over there. By putting Kagame in, we got rid of Mobutu and Zaire, and then the Congo, 6 million dead since the first invasion from Rwanda of Congo in the mid-1990s. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And Ivory Coast, yes, just like Sudan, May 9th, we get the new Republic of South Sudan, independent country, majority Christian. Susan Rice, our ambassador to UN, Obama's ambassador to UN, has always hated the government of Sudan. She has been literally in bed with some of these rebel leaders in South Sudan. She has a visceral hatred for the Arab North. She is not a very good diplomat because all through Africa, they know that she is totally biased, and she's anything but a diplomat. Ivory Coast, you have the Alassane Ouattara, the rebel guy that took over, said he won the election, and he said no. He said he won the election. The incumbent said he didn't. We had a civil war. Alassane Ouattara's wife is a French citizen, very close to Sarkozy, very close to the diamond business. There are diamonds in Ivory Coast. And this is what it's all about.
Yeah, anybody tries to sell diamonds, they call it blood diamonds.
Blood diamonds.
The real blood diamonds are the ones sold through the Oppenheimer De Beers monopoly. But then they call all the other diamonds they don't control. In fact, tomorrow when you're on with us, let's spend part of the interview getting into Africa because you've been a witness before the U.S. House of Representatives, but also to the UN Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. And after the fact, from my research, it's confirmed that the UN actually help position some of the people to be massacred. Is that correct?
Well, the UN was in there with Belgian peacekeepers when the plane carrying the 2 presidents was shot down. Of course, many of those Belgians were killed in retaliation, but some of these Belgian peacekeepers were in proximity to where the Kagame forces, the rebel forces, were in a position to fire the shoulder-launched SAM missiles that took out the airplane. You know, the UN's never investigated that. It was an international act of terrorism. The French government investigated. I testified before the French terrorism judge on that issue. But the UN never, and the U.S. certainly doesn't, never investigated.
Why were you testifying on Africa? Why are you seen as an expert?
Well, I wrote a book some years ago called Genocide and Covert Operations in Africa 93 to 99, which took in this whole issue with the shooting down of the aircraft. Years later, they said that, well, they couldn't find the black box. The black box was found in a drawer at the UN headquarters in New York. It had already been looked at by the FAA and the NTSB, and we know what they do in these cases. They cover up. And it's quite clear that Africa is a playground for our nasty special ops people, the private mercenary companies. They've been in there for years, all kinds of. Blackwater is just one of them. There are many others, U.S., French, Belgian. I
saw De Beers in 99 in New Yorker magazine bragging, the World Diamond Monopoly Company, for those that don't know, that whenever a country tries to mine diamonds, they just send in mercs.
Oh, absolutely, because the whole diamond trade is based on, it's fairly recent. It was
artificial scarcity.
Absolutely, and you know, it's always a wedding ring, and you got to give a diamond wedding ring to somebody you're proposing to. This comes out of Marilyn Monroe, Breakfast at Tiffany's, and all. Hollywood created the mystique about diamonds.
Diamonds were only semi-precious till they were sold to people as another Edward Bernays fraud.
Absolutely, and now there's effectively a monopoly with the De Beers and the diamond cutters in Antwerp, Amsterdam, Tel Aviv, and increasingly we see some of that being outsourced to places like India and Bangkok, Thailand, because, you know, the diamond cutters in Europe charge too much in the way of salary. So we even see in their own industry them outsourcing to these various developing countries.
Totally unbelievable. Let's jam in a few more here. Tariq in Georgia, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yep, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Oh, hey, how you doing, Alex Jones? How you doing, Wayne?
Good. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I just want to give a couple of comments on Obama and why I believe they put him in office. I basically believe they put him in office to just give you a little background. I'm a 33-year-old African-American male. I was in the Navy for 4 years. I've been out for 4 years now, too. Honorable discharge. I believe they put him in office to basically shut black people up, because anytime you say something bad about them, it's like if you're white, you're a racist, and if you're black, you're a hater. So it's like that double-edged sword. And
no, I mean, it's a way to inject identity politics to further divide and conquer, and then give torture, war, and Wall Street looting left cover. Wayne Madsen.
Well, no, I agree, and I've spoken to many African Americans from Chicago and Washington, D.C., and they agree with the caller, Tariq from Georgia.
Are these fake polls that 93% of blacks like him?
Well, who are they polling? I think most of the polls are fake now. You know, it used to be that there were independent pollsters. Now look at the polling companies. They're affiliated with ABC News, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. These are corporate media entities. So, of course, you know, it's how they ask the questions, who they ask the questions to. I don't believe the polls. I think the polls are totally...
Let me ask Tariq this. What amount of folks that you know who are African-American, what amount of them really like Obama?
Vast majority of them, especially the older ones, which, like, I have friends that are, like, close to 60, and they believe him, like, they'll follow him to their grave if need be.
Well, that's what, just like white people would follow George W. Bush to their grave. It's this identity politics. These guys are just puppets. Tariq, great point. Sorry to Ron, Mike, Tim, and others. We'll be back live tomorrow, 11 a.m. Central, and Wayne will be back in studio. Great job to the crew. Great job to Genesis. God bless you all. Wayne Madsen, Washington, D.C.-based investigative journalist, written for some of the biggest publications in the country, The American Conservative, The Progressive, Counterpunch, guest on Fox, CNN, RT, and he, of course, worked in anti-submarine naval warfare. He also worked with the National Security Agency, the Naval Data Automated Command, and he was one of the senior fellow members of the Electronic Privacy Information Center. We're about to go to break, but recently he was given, through high-level sources, threats from the White House to quit looking into Obama's birth certificate and CIA past, and he was just a guest on one of our sister stations in Dallas, KHVN 97 FM. We're on KKGM 1630 up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And the station said they called the White House to get a quote about the threats you were getting. I bet the mafia up there doesn't like that.
Well, they got somebody from the White House who said he was aware of the story, said, well, put it in an email to us, and of course they never heard back by airtime, the station. They didn't return the call. Now, this is a black gospel station. Is this how Obama's treating a group of folks that he considers to be his base? I think it goes with the arrogance of Barack Obama and his administration.
Obama, we had the head of the Small Business League on, hundreds of thousands of members. Obama got rid, effectively, of the Black Small Business Assistance Fund.
I'm not surprised, and now we know today it's being reported that he's not delivered any of his promises to deal with the joblessness amongst the African-American population in this country.
It's amazing. Give us there have been some new developments. We've got about 15 seconds. What's coming up after the break?
Well, we know that the Justice Department has just dropped the criminal investigation of Thomas Tam, who was the guy who released the info about the Stellar Wind illegal NSA wiretapping program.
All right, and there's some more on Obama's birth certificate. We'll break it all down with Wayne Madsen on the other side. I'm Alex Jones. The next 25 minutes, Wayne Madsen, day 2. In studio with us. I'm going to go do an interview for an upcoming film with him after this. Great to have you here. And you're in your Sunday dress, so we're honored. Wayne, you were getting into new developments on the Social Security number, on his college records. This new poll out, upwards of 2/3 don't think he was born in this country because the public finally is learning not to trust government.
Well, we have, there's a couple new developments. One is from Hawaii State Senator Sam Sloan. He says he knew the Obama's grandparents in Hawaii, and he's stating that he feels that Obama was born in Hawaii, but that if the birth certificate is exposed, it may reveal that Barack Obama Sr. is not the actual father.
That's right. He's gone public. That's all over the Honolulu and Hawaiian papers.
Yeah, it's all over the place. And is this the reason why? I do know that the White House likes to divert people to the birth certificate, but they won't produce the actual certificate. They say, no, it's a certificate of live birth. Is there something in the actual original birth certificate that they're saying, okay, well, the birth certificate's real, but you can't see? It may not be the fact that he...
Exactly. They're hiding something in the past.
I believe he was born in Hawaii. The state senator says he believes he was born in Hawaii. He certainly knew the grandparents. He probably knew them well enough to know that Barack Obama was born in Hawaii. And now we have this issue with the Social Security number that was issued to President Obama. It was not a Hawaii-issued Social Security number. It was issued in the state of Connecticut. This is the Social Security number he used on his Selective Service Registration form. He used it on other forms, and it's 042XX because of privacy. We don't know 4425. It was previously held by an individual who died in was born, I should say, in 1890, and had died, and the number was reissued in the state of Connecticut to President Obama in the late 19th.
President Soetoro.
President Soetoro, Sabarka, whatever. I think there's other avenues that have not been looked at.
What we know is his records are being covered up like nothing we've ever seen. We know he gave up citizenship to be Indonesian. We know they've been covering things up. And so, yes, they'd love to say, birth certificate. And then his wife gives all these speeches years ago about he went back to his home country of Kenya. What do you think's going on here?
Obama said he was going to run the most transparent administration in the history of the country. Even on his own background, he's been totally opaque. He has not been transparent. He's not been transparent on other issues as well. But if he can't be transparent on his own background, how can we expect him to be forthcoming on other issues having to do with the economy, the intelligence community, surveillance programs, and everything?
What does your gut tell you? I mean, you think he was born in Hawaii?
I believe he was born in Hawaii, but I do believe that he may have opted for an Indonesian passport because Lolo Soetoro adopted him. We also know
he changed his name,
right? And we know he changed his name. We also know that Lolo Soetoro adopted another little girl at the time who was about the same age as Obama. She claimed that she was Obama's stepsister, but this other stepsister of Obama, Ing Soetoro or Soetoro Ing, says, "Oh, that woman was a charlatan. She was not adopted." But
and there was a tranny nanny. I mean, this is a weird group.
Well, and this supposed half sister died a couple years ago. We don't know what she died of. Obviously, it wasn't old age because she's the same age as Obama. Then we have the nanny tranny that raised Obama in Jakarta, who went by the name Turdy. That individual apparently is still alive. But when that information came out in a movie made in Indonesia last year, there was this pushback against the producers of the film, saying, "Oh, this was a fictional character. There was no such transsexual nanny." But now we know that there was a transsexual nanny. So almost at every turn, we find out that the Obama administration and he is not forthcoming in something he should know totally about, his own background.
More and more it becomes clear they put Obama in knowing he had all this baggage, knowing that they could blackmail him and control him, but also as a way to claim it was hope and change, but as a way to create division amongst the American people so we would fight with each other instead of going after the private Federal Reserve.
Absolutely, and looking at the streets in Washington now, I can say something about his hope. There is a lot more people out on the streets asking for change. I've never seen so many homeless people. Even when Reagan turned them out of the mental institutions, when he cut back funding, and we had all the homelessness. When Mitch Snyder was big with his movement in the 1980s, it was nothing compared. Because what we're seeing now in Washington are homeless couples. People in their 50s and 60s are out on the street.
And remember all those people at his event saying, "Thank you, Mr. President," right after he got elected. I'm not going to pay for my car, my house anymore. And he played along with it. They really thought that Ben Bernanke was going to helicopter money to them, or that parachutes, with Volkswagen Beetles were going to come out of the sky.
Well, I don't think he has any affinity for the people who are hurting in this country. As a matter of fact, let's go back to the 08 campaign, and he said something that Hillary could have used as a campaign issue, but didn't. He said, when they were talking about the price of food was going up, when the price of gas was going up, he said, "Yes, Michelle and I noticed that the price of arugula was very high." Now, who eats arugula in South Chicago except for that tiny community in Hyde Park around the University of Chicago? Hillary didn't use it, but that was almost George Bush and the store scanner moment. It showed that he was totally Obama out of touch with society. Arugula? I mean, people in South Chicago can't afford arugula even if they knew what it was.
Yeah, they're eating rice and beans.
Absolutely, and and now many people can't eat even the staples anymore because the price of food is skyrocketing.
And meanwhile, Geithner comes out today and says we have a strong dollar and strong dollar policy when they know their policy of monetization of debt is causing it to be devalued.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, well, look, again, this gets back, Timothy Geithner's father, Peter Geithner, was Obama's mother's boss at the Ford Foundation. She spent a lot of time in New York. We don't know what she was doing in New York, but she was there at a time when the Ford Foundation was laundering a lot of money for the CIA, for various programs. We do know that Obama's mother spoke Javanese, and we know that when she was in New York, there was an attempt to assassinate the president of Suriname, who's back in as president, and Obama has already signaled he won't have anything to do with this guy. Again, does he hold these grudges like he might hold against Gaddafi? Was his mother involved in the attempt by the CIA to oust Desi Bouterse in Suriname in 1986? She was in New York working for Ford, spoke Javanese. She would have been a hot commodity for the CIA in that year. And
yesterday you went through the incredible intelligence agency connections of his entire family.
Oh, there's more there than meets the eye. I was recently told that we know that President Obama's mother was in Pakistan. She was in Indonesia. She traveled to the Philippines with the Asian Development Bank and the other fronts that she worked for. But she was also in the country of Ghana in the 1980s. What was she doing there? Obama hasn't said anything about her time in Ghana, but we know that in 1987, when she was supposedly in Ghana, the country to the north, their president was assassinated in a CIA coup. Thomas Sankara, who was really the Hugo Chavez of Africa. He said, we're gonna pull out of the World Bank, we're gonna pull out of the IMF, we're tired of these Western banks telling us what to do, and he was assassinated. Mommy Dearest seemed to have been in an awful lot of places where the CIA was conducting activities, and she seemed to have the credentials to be in those places. And then they try to say she was some hippie flower child, just a free spirit and trying to help poor people get microloans. I'm not buying it. I think the evidence speaks for itself.
We got a little bit into it, but do you want to say anything more about this new leaker case that you were just mentioning?
Yes, Tom Tam was a Justice Department prosecutor whose father was a career FBI agent, worked under J. Edgar Hoover. He was the person who leaked the information about this illegal stellar wind. Remember, stellar wind was itself a classified term. A handful of people in the Bush administration knew about it. He leaked the information, and they stormed into his home with a SWAT team, took his kids' computers, took their Christmas card mailing list. Well, the Justice Department just dropped its investigation of Tom Tam. But again, how does he get his reputation back? Who's going to pay for his legal expenses?
But you're supposed to leak information if it's illegal.
Absolutely.
National security doesn't protect crime.
Well, we have Tom Drake, who leaked information about massive corruption in contracts at the National Security Agency. His trial starts in Baltimore very soon. He's being charged under the Espionage Act of 1917. 4 people in the history of this country have been charged with that. Well, if they're dropping the charges against Tom Tam, why aren't they dropping the charges against Tom Drake? And while they're at it, they can drop the charges against Bradley Manning, because there is no way he could have made off with over 250,000 cables on a Lady Gaga CD. That is just a made-up story, in my opinion. It didn't happen. But Obama, like Nixon with Charles Manson, said, oh, he's guilty. He committed a crime.
Well, it boggles the mind how they've been torturing Bradley Manning, naked in a freezing cell, when obviously a private isn't going to have 3 decades of secret cables from multiple different agencies. The Army doesn't have that. Bottom line, what do you think, WikiLeaks? Because they put out some good info, but some stuff that makes it look like kind of a Soros operation. You worked with the NSA. You've worked as a journalist at all different levels. What's the word in D.C.? What is WikiLeaks?
It's a classic good cop, bad cop type thing. So much information has been released. The newspapers, the corporate papers, went ahead and redacted some of these cables after they consulted with the State Department. If you're going to do that, there's always a chance that these cables have been manipulated, altered in some respect. We know the history of the Bush administration with altering intelligence. Yellow cake uranium from Niger, and major politicians taking money from Saddam Hussein for the Oil for Food program, and these documents that were supposedly found in the rubble in Baghdad had been doctored with whiteout. I mean, not even a good job at doing it. So we know their history of these neocons. I suspect that the cables that were released about Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, Yemen, Pakistan, other countries have probably been highly altered to bring pressure to bear on these governments to...
Well, it's admitted the State Department's trying to destabilize the Middle East.
Right, and then we have some information that comes out about one Al Qaeda guy was an MI6 operative. Well, you got to put the good stuff in there to make the other leaks look.
Well, that's what I was about to bring up. AP, Reuters, Sky Television, all reporting Al Qaeda bomber worked for UK intelligence. And they go on and admit the documents are real and that he was a British intel guy out commanding Al Qaeda forces. Same story with the 7/7 bombing with the SWAT. Same story with Anwar al-Awlaki running the underwear bombing, the Times Square. I mean, why would Fox News be given a Pentagon document and then the Pentagon go, yeah, that's true? Are they almost inoculating this in case it comes out later that I mean, bin Laden literally is a hand puppet for the globalists?
Well, they may be, or they may be. It may be like a straw man they're putting out there to get it out there so they can control the reaction rather than have a.
That's what I meant. Titrate the dose.
I think so. And look, we got to go back to what the former British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook said, that Al Qaeda was nothing more than a CIA database. It meant the base. It meant a database of all these Arabs, Egyptians, Saudis that were used in the war against the Soviet Union. And he died suddenly of a heart attack after making these revelations. Robin Cook, as Foreign Secretary, was also in charge of MI6, and he was in charge of the British NSA, the GCHQ. He would have known this.
Why did Dr. David Kelly, the head inspector, go public and say they've told me they're going to kill me and put me in the woods, and they did it? Why would the former head of the MI6, why did he go public? I mean, they've got to know what's going to happen to him.
I think Robin Cook realized what a treasonous person Tony Blair was. He resigned from the Blair government, and then he went public.
Yeah, the word is he was mad about him murdering Kelly.
Right, and the word is we had a leak of information about spying on the UN from a GCHQ person named Catherine Gunn, and they never prosecuted her because the word is that people like Robin Cook and Claire Short, who also resigned from the Blair administration, probably encouraged that leak to just point out that Tony Blair was just a lying, deceptive.
Well, the word is he was the same as Obama. He kept tabs on the leftists in college for MI5.
Oh, absolutely. And Tony Blair, look, the minute Clinton leaves office, he's running over here to hug George W. Bush. The guy's a total chameleon. He's, but people like...
By the way, they're talking about him for EU president or Schwarzenegger, which is perfect because it's an unelected position. So we'll talk about that with Wayne Madsen when we come back going a little bit into overdrive. WikiLeaks is also reporting, and the Telegraph's got a report out today that, they're radicalizing people in London mosque. That's what the Guantanamo torture shows. Actually, what it shows is that they torture people there for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and then release them, and they end up being the commanders of the rebel forces in places like Libya. And from our Bilderberg sources, through Jim Tucker, that have proven to be very accurate, they were beside themselves at a Trilateral Commission meeting last week. That first the Stanford Review tried to deny he was at that meeting, and then they had to correct. Well, I guess he was at a trilateral meeting in that neighborhood. Okay, but still, this Alex Jones report isn't true. But to make a long story short, the globalists are hopping mad that the LA Times and others reported that indeed Al-Qaeda is the main force of the, quote, good guys in Libya. I mean, how much more obvious does this have to get, Wayne?
I mean, we have so much ample evidence that Al-Qaeda is just basically has been run by the CIA and its affiliate agencies around the world, Australia, Britain, other countries. I don't know how much more evidence people need to know that this is a fake organization. It was created for the whole purpose of bringing about, amongst other things, the Patriot Act here and similar acts and laws in other countries. The mere fact of what we have to travel like we do now. When I left Reagan yesterday, I had to go through the millimeter wave detection. And I never take my wallet out. And the guy says, "What's in your pocket?" I said, "My wallet." He says, "Give me that wallet." I'm not used to giving.
It's all prisoner training. Line up. Give me that.
Exactly. And then they insisted on wanding my hands and checking it in some machine. And he says, "Okay, you can go now."
It's training you that you're bad. You're a prisoner. It's taking normal, law-abiding people and giving us prisoner training.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember when you didn't have to go through a magnetometer when you went to the airport. You could go to your plane, with 15 minutes to spare.
You got a better chance of being killed by a honeybee. I pulled up the numbers than by an Al-Qaeda terrorist. I mean, since when do they... I mean, even if you don't think the government's behind the terror, folks, and they're behind almost all of it, there is some real organic. The way they, it's going to get you. Oh, man. Oh, it's so scary. Don't worry, we're going to take all your rights away and launch a bunch of wars and make trillions of bucks. And then we get the internal MIAC Homeland Security reports. It's all about landowners, gun owners, anti-war, libertarian, Ron Paul groups. This is all about the American people.
Well, remember, they instituted airport checks because of the planes being hijacked to Cuba. And what were we exposed to? Oh, these people are hijacking planes to Cuba because they're all in bed with Fidel Castro. Like Castro, planned the whole operation. Again, that sounds like that. Even those original hijackings may have...
Well, now it's come out, even in that... it's the documentary about the Munich Olympics. I forget the name. It's One Day in September. It has Michael Douglas as the voiceover. And at the end, they have the head of German intelligence from the time go ahead and admit they staged it. And he goes on and admits that they staged fake hijackings after it. Like it's cute. But still the terrorists are going to get you, but it was staged.
Well, we know...
it gets worse. We know some of the hijackings and bombings blamed on Fidel were actually carried out by the CIA. They were fake.
Right. And we know from French intelligence and British intelligence sources that the hijacking of the Air France plane to Uganda, to Entebbe. Remember, raid on Entebbe was conducted by the Mossad to make the Palestinians look bad because the French were talking about maybe making some deal with the Palestinians.
And by the way, this is not our opinion. I mean, I go see a movie 10 years ago that got a best documentary of that year, and they just admit at the end it was all staged. It was weird.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost like we are truly living in the Matrix. Some of us have taken the red pill, but many of us opted for the blue pill, but really should take the red pill so they know how deep the rabbit hole really goes.
Absolutely. The Google search term when we come back in 1 minute. Stay with us. We got about 5 minutes left, and we're going back into key retransmission with Bill Still and a breakdown of the geopolitical developments that are taking place right now and the fact that the mainstream media is losing all credibility very, very quickly and imploding on itself. But you had one other development on the Obama front that's important.
Well, recently there was a hearing in the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. An individual sued Larry Sinclair. He wrote a book about Obama in Chicago, claimed that he had 2 sexual trysts with Obama in 1999, did cocaine with Obama. The law firm that represented the plaintiff is Patton and Boggs, one of the most powerful law firms in Washington, D.C. Let's figure about $700 to $800 an hour law firm. So they were used to sue Larry Sinclair and also his booksellers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Books A Million. Judge Leon threw out that lawsuit against the booksellers. The suit against Larry Sinclair is still being deliberated upon, but it was quite interesting. I and only one other journalist, my colleague Andrew Craig, were sitting in that courtroom. Nobody from the Post, nobody from any other publication. We were there. We heard Judge Leon in deliberations ask the question. Well, he said, "Well, what accusations are we making here? Are these the accusations against the president?" And he clearly, this is now part of the official transcript in a court hearing in Washington, D.C. This one will not go away either. We have the choir director at Trinity United Church of Christ, Donald Young. His mother says she's now fearful of her life and that her son was fearful of his life. It was her son that contacted Larry Sinclair and said, "I saw your YouTube video about Obama. Be very, very careful. These people are dangerous." And, of course, Donald Young was killed gangland execution style. He was on his way. He wanted to go to Liberia to teach school to get out of the United States, talking about people who knew Obama very well, in his case maybe really very well, wanting to get out of the country, but they nailed him, and they nailed another guy from the church, a guy named Larry Bland. So we have two people winding up dead right out of Trinity United Church of Christ. These people, I do believe, mean business when they issue four threats.
But you weren't told why you've been through an embassy, a foreign embassy, and a major news publication, been told the White House wants you dead. And you say, well, figuratively, and they said, no, literally. You're just guessing it's the CIA background, but I mean, it may be that you're digging around into his sexual escapades.
That could be, and certainly but that has been also the subject of the tabloids. They've covered that extensively. The Globe has written about that. I think because they control Chicago and they control it very well, they can deal with that. What they probably can't deal with is they don't have their fingers everywhere as much as they might want to think they do. I don't think they can deal with Indonesia. I don't think they can deal with the mother's background in Pakistan.
Hawaii, the high-powered people coming out saying, no, he was born here. It's just he has a different name. He's a different person.
Right. I've even heard from one fairly reputable source that maybe Obama's real father was a Cuban who, when his mother was taken by her father to Cuba. And
I'll tell you, I've looked at his dad. He looks nothing like his supposed Kenyan dad. I mean, he looks nothing.
There is absolutely no resemblance. One could say that the resemblance would be more fitting of somebody who might have been an Afro-Cuban or somebody from one of the more Hamitic tribes of the Horn of Africa in Kenya or a neighboring country, but certainly not somebody who was a member of the Luo tribe, because they are a Bantu tribe, and Obama just does not have any of the Bantu features.
I mean, his dad looks nothing like him.
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
There is absolutely no resemblance. And this comes from people from Africa who
know the tribes.
Who are from Uganda and Kenya. They look at the father. They say this can't be this. It can't be his father. They know this because this is their continent, and in their region they know these things about the people.
Well, it's almost like if you had two black people and they had a redheaded kid. I mean, it just doesn't. Hey, Wayne, great job.